Hello and welcome to the Defense Pro Podcast. Today I am with Tony March, the CEO of Babcock Canada. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are things?
Well, we live in consequential times.
Yeah.
So it's a really exciting time to be involved in defense procurement, but absolutely consequential times for the industry and for the country writ large.
Well, for all the listeners, we're actually at CanSec Day 2. The energy's been totally different than previous years. I mean, everyone's actually excited. And Babcock's doing amazing things with the in-service support for the Victoria-class submarines. You guys have also done partnership with Campbell, I believe, for armored vehicles. So what do you think going the next 5 years is going to look like for you guys?
Well, you're really seeing this uplift and the investment that Canada's making in defense. So as a company, Babcock, we've been a prime contractor and delivering submarine maintenance to Canada for 18 years now. And we're really keen to continue that core part of our business. We've been leading the industrial portion of submarine sustainment for Canada. And then as well, you mentioned some of the partnerships with other sectors, and we're really looking to grow and bring some of the experience and capabilities the parent company have, leverage Canadian partners, and then grow into those different sectors, whether that's in land vehicle support or whether that's in some more complex mission systems.
Going forward with the Carney government's big announcement yesterday that they're going to be buying new AWACS through Saab and Bombardier, do you really see more interest in the Canadian government trying to get partnerships and more support from you guys and products, of course?
Well, I think there's, the Carney government's laid out a build, partner, buy framework, and it's very heavily, build in Canada, absolutely the priority, clearly understood, and then partnering is right behind that. And we think as a UK domiciled company, a defense prime, second largest defense company in the United Kingdom, we're well positioned to partner with Canada where those capabilities, where there's some gaps, how we can leverage our existing nearly 600 people in Canada to partner and deliver some of those solutions going forward. So we feel like we're well positioned in that going forward.
And you took over the company March last year, I believe, and that's quite the time to get in when everyone is now like defense oriented in Canada. So how are you doing?
So it's been a pretty busy 14 months. You talk about taking over the CEO role at a consequential time, as I said. I've been involved in defense for the entirety of my professional life. I spent 21 years in uniform. I've been in industry for 8 years, and myself, my colleagues, I think you talked about the energy. It's a great environment to be in when everybody's really busy. But we're busy on things that are actually going to happen. There's a confidence that I haven't seen in the last 2 decades that the work we're putting in is going to result in meaningful capability and economic activity for the country.
Of course, the big buzzword last year at CanSec was submarines, and again this year it seems to be doing that again, right? I know Babcock's made a memorandum of understanding, I believe, with Hanwha.
Teaming agreement.
The teaming agreement, sorry.
Agreement.
How do you guys feel about that, the submarine procurement going forward?
Well, I think all the signals coming from Canada is we're going to get a decision on that submarine, the acquisition of the platform, soon.
Yeah, I've heard even mid-June. So,
we're down to potentially weeks, not months.
Yeah.
So I think that whole program, since the last year, has been moving at an unprecedented pace in Canadian defense procurement. We're coming to the end of the selection of the platform. We've got a teaming agreement with Hanwha Ocean. We have our weapons handling and launch world-leading technologies on that platform. But Canada is also at the same time running a process to have the sovereign sustainment capability for the future. That's a separate process from the acquisition. That process is running in parallel. It's a little bit behind the acquisition. There's recently a request for information, which we have responded to. So, as I said, Babcock is very much interested in continuing to provide the best support we can to Canada. The selection of the platform is a very, very important decision in that. But right behind that is then the multiple decades of sustainment. And we're looking to leverage our experience in delivery engineering, project management, supply chain localization, and continue to do that for Canada in the future.
Yeah, it's easy enough to buy a submarine. It's like you're saying, it's the in-service support that it's going to be 35, 45 years, hopefully not longer, because we have had a history of extending our vessels and tanks and whatnot. What if you? This is so. Your background, of course, is engineering. What lessons do you think there are to be learned from the Victoria class submarine acquisition and the maintenance that you guys have done? Because it's been intense for you guys.
Yeah, it's really, really intense. And I think one of the lessons that's already been learned is when the Victoria class was procured in the late 1990s, a capability extension. And at that time, Canada didn't have a industry sustainment capability for submarines. That's been built up over the last 2 decades. So I think it's really important that Canada doesn't drop the baton, that there's a transition. That transition phase, there's a significant amount of risk. So how do you mitigate that risk? How do you make sure you smoothly transition from the Victoria class to the CPSP in a manner that protects the expertise, protects the workforce? The workforce has to grow, has to likely more than double in size. It's got to shift from operating on a single site to operating on 2 coasts. So there's a transition phase, a lesson to be learned there. There's a lot of lessons to be learned through supply chain localization and bringing that into Canada. It's been a real success story on the Victoria class, is taking that predominantly UK-based supply chain and over a decade transitioning it to a Canadian one. That work can start very early in the CPSP as soon as the OEM is selected for providing the platform. So I think that's been well learned. And also, Canada's going forward. They're making investments in dedicated infrastructure to support submarines. They're co-locating the maintenance workforce. They're taking those steps. So they're not just learning what's happened in Canada, but they're really using international best practice. I think that is going to set Canada up for successful delivery. We have a lot of lessons about the details of executing submarine refit work. Submarines are different than surface ships. They're more complex. They have a much greater degree of density. They're harder to work on, and it's a specialized skill set that you need in order to successfully deliver it.
And the commander of CFB, the squadron, was saying yesterday that the government's going to commit to at least $10 billion in expanding their facilities there, obviously because of new submarines, new service vessels and whatnot. What impact do you think that's going to have on you guys actually trying to provide the same level of service and maintenance?
Well, having that dedicated infrastructure and having purpose-built infrastructure makes a huge difference in driving availability. And, those billions of dollars of investment, that's what's needed to sustain these highly complex assets going forward. So, Canada's come out, they've been very clear that they're going to make a strategic investment to have that capability and then have contractor supporting in that. So we're really keen to be able to work. We're comfortable working in that environment. But having that purpose-built infrastructure, I think, is a really positive thing for generating the availability that Canada needs.
And what about the East Coast? Because you're saying now you're going to have to expand your services potentially there, right? So
yeah, and that's a bit of a different. There's just a bit of a different story on the West Coast. There is a submarine support industry ecosystem that doesn't yet exist in Halifax. Yes, a lot of work is done in Fleet Maintenance Facility Cape Scott. They have submarine experts. HMCS Windsor has been operated out of the East Coast for many, many years successfully. The East Coast there's going to need to be a commensurate investment in infrastructure as well. That is part of the plan for the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project. And again, we're looking to grow our existing footprint in Halifax. We have staff in Halifax today. How do we grow that footprint substantially to support many more submarines being based there in the future?
And sustainably, too, to make sure that you have that level of expertise and support for 30 to 40 years, right? So,
and I think you're seeing that the government and the Navy, government of Nova Scotia and the Navy understand the challenge that they have. Nova Scotia has done a fantastic job through the National Shipbuilding Strategy of growing a workforce, a marine experience workforce there. So it's not going into, it's going into a healthy environment of naval construction and sustainment. So it's a solvable problem. It will be a challenge, but definitely the conditions for success are set.
Now, is there anything you want to bring up right now that you might want to discuss?
I'd say Babcock's known really for the submarine work that we do in Canada, but definitely as we look forward, as we look to this generational investments that's being made, the other capabilities that we have to offer. And I talked briefly about opportunities in land vehicle sustainment, opportunities in strategic communication, that we have capability as a trusted partner and an ally in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in New Zealand, and we're actively looking about working with Canadian small, medium enterprise, developing a partner solution to deliver some of these other programs. So yes, we're known as the submarine company in Canada, but we're much more than that, and looking forward to being able to grow into these markets driven by the investments that Canada's making.
I mean, I mentioned earlier that you have a partnership with Cambly, which builds armored vehicles in Quebec, and that's one of those examples.
Yeah, example of that, different organizations, that's a light utility vehicle competitor. There's other opportunities as well beyond just those individual partnerships. Really looking to how can we support the Canadian Army writ large with their sustainment challenges.
I mean, I'm surprised. I mean, there have been a lot of questions I've been given by CANSEC. One of them why is there a Cambly vehicle it's got the license plate saying Babcock, but it's definitely embossed by Cambly. Why is that sitting in your?
Yeah, so we have a partnership with Cambly. Yeah. It's also an opportunity to show it's not just the asset.
Yeah.
It's about how you sustain that asset. We've got some innovative technology about from Barnacle, how do we integrate, how do you get information off that to enable sustainment. But it's really showing the picture that you have not just getting the asset, but then how do you sustain that asset in service throughout its life. And that's just an example. Yeah. And as well, so it's an attractive, gets people to the booth, gets people talking, gets people asking questions, and it's not just a submarine company.
True, and that was one of the things I've kind of seen around CANSEC too, is that a lot of people sort of know what companies do, but they don't really know what the companies actually do fully, right? And that's one of the prime examples. And I think maybe that's one of those things that Canadian industry, the Canadian military, the government, and even just the population, the public itself need to actually learn. Like, if we're going to be spending money into the Canadian defense industry, yeah, you guys aren't just the submarine guys.
Sustain land vehicles for the British Army, provide critical satellite communications and high-frequency radio communications in 3 of the 5 ICE countries. So, again, it's not just an export of that technology. It's actively working with Canadian partners, small, medium business, to deliver that into Canada.
And with the new Defense Investment Agency going forward at some point, and just the energy from the government, are you guys finding that there's more investment and interest in helping support the outgrowing Canadian supply chain?
Oh, absolutely. Canada's open for business and defense. There's multiple pathways, programs, and tools that are available to help companies, whether they're small, medium, or large, take advantage and contribute to this space. So it really is a paradigm shift. The interest is real, and definitely you feel it. It's tangible, and we're seeing that from those different government agencies we interact with.
And your background is engineering, and you have 7 degrees, I believe?
3 or 4.
3 or 4. I mean, taking over as CEO, I mean, obviously, at this point, I mean, have there been any personal challenges you faced?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that I've had to face coming into this role has been just adapting to the pace and volume of change and shifting as a company from previously there were a limited number of opportunities, so you had to focus a huge amount of effort to try to win and compete for those limited number of opportunities. Now there's more opportunities than there is capacity to deal with, and that's a fundamental change for the business, because there's potential opportunities that we're going to decide that we're not going to be able to do because we simply don't have the human capital or the time, and that's a fundamental shift and how as a business we've been operating for the past 8 years. So I'm going to explain to the workforce why maybe we're not going after this particular opportunity, because another one may be more attractive for financial or capability or other reasons. So that's been a big shift in navigating the business through that change that's occurred.
No, that's the responsible way of doing it too. Instead of just trying to sign on to every contract, put the intense workload on your workforce while also trying to expand your own capability as well.
And the fastest way to fail is to not meet your commitments.
Yeah.
And we certainly have experienced that previously. We put a tremendous amount of effort into making sure we deliver the critical submarine maintenance activity we do on schedule, and not overcommitting is absolutely key.
And do you find with the partnerships that you have that they are able to take away some of the workload and actually so you can commit a bit more to the contracts?
Yeah, we've had a tremendous amount of success in leveraging the industrial base. We definitely don't do this work alone. We're partnered with a number of companies to provide capability, provide staff. When we need to. The nature of work is that there's going to be peaks and valleys, and you don't always need to organically deliver all of those peaks. We brought together a team to deliver submarine hull survey requirements. We were using 5 or 6 different Canadian suppliers to deliver that package of work, coordinating that, and that was really win-win. You get companies that get work, they get experience, and for us it provided that flexibility, provided the ability for Canada to surge some spending. So, there's leveraging the broader ecosystem is absolutely something that we do, and we're proud of what we do.
And of course, as we start procuring, new subs, new vessels, armed vehicles, whatever else, the workload is going to change because all of a sudden we've got new stuff. But how do we either shift from our old equipment or maintain and modernize it as new stuff comes in, and then, of course, trying to maintain and service a new capability, right?
So, we're going through this transition. I talked about the need on CPSP to have a managed transition and not dropping the baton, from smoothly going from one to the other. Canada has a role in that in making sure they have contracts in place that overlap to provide the mechanisms for workforce leveling to do that. We're definitely in a growth mode as a company. We've grown over 15% in headcount over the past 12 months. So part of that being ready is looking forward and having confidence that programs are going to come. Because it takes time to hire, takes time to develop, takes time to bring people on. Now there's a much greater degree of confidence. Asking me now, am I comfortable starting to hire knowing that work is coming? I'm much, much more comfortable now than I was 12 months ago. So part of it is continuing that growth trajectory so that when you're chasing these 2 or 3 programs and 1 or 2 of them become good, that you're positioned to deliver that. So, that's part of the role of government, is giving confidence that these programs are going to happen, and there's an increasing degree of confidence that they are, which gives confidence to hire and be ready.
And that, for me, is still completely surprising, because I just remember from the old Trudeau days, Harper days, Chrétien, of getting rid of stuff. I mean, I'm optimistic, but again, I'm hesitant as well. And for you to say that your confidence is growing after the past 12 months, I mean, it's reassuring.
It's growing, so it's still being very controlled about it. It's very easy to get this wrong, but it's, this is a discussion as a leadership team and the executive we have quite regularly about how do we be positioned for success.
And how is the government communicating to you guys? I mean, is there an increased amount?
Well, we're seeing, you go through a budgetary process, you get an allocation on existing programs. So, when do those budgets get released? How much of those budgets get released? So it's not one single thing. It's not a single message. It's, an additive factor of, every interaction you have. And it's just, the confidence is growing. It's like, okay, we'd like you to do more with more. I think that's the message the government is starting to say. Is yes, we want efficiency. We want you to spend those dollars effectively, but it is more with more is the message that's coming.
And, as the government wants to spend more and to get more, Canada has a lot to actually try to build its own domestic industrial base. So it's going to be hard for companies like yours, for example, and others, obviously, to rely on a Canadian supply chain, right? So there might be opportunities for still partnerships with the UK, Australia, etc., right?
So, we're heavily incentivized under the ITB program to deliver Canadian content through that supply chain, and is very much making those investments in Canada where we can. But where you need to, there are some things you do need to buy for reasons of intellectual property or capacity, and we have the tools and we have the ability to do that where you need to. But I'd say globally, it's not just Canada. The whole defense industrial base globally is under tension. Everybody is increasing in response to the geopolitical environment. So it's not just Canada that's looking to do these things; it's everybody. So that the challenges we have are the same challenges that other jurisdictions are facing.
Yeah, and supply chains of critical minerals and again spare parts from other places. Well, they had to prioritize their own domestic production and service needs, of course. Do you foresee any challenges going forward? Through the current government's.
I think one of the challenges going forward is going to be sustaining this momentum, sustaining the interest in this. In order for this investment in defense capability to be successful, it has to extend past a single electoral mandate. I think everybody's optimistic. We believe, or the industry is optimistic. You see this coming. There's a risk that does it sustain? Can you sustain that momentum? Going from where we were to 2%, the path to 3.5% GDP. That plan that Prime Minister laid out goes out to 2035. So is this momentum going to sustain over the next decade? It's a big ship with a small rudder, so it takes time to get changed into a different direction. So we're going to start. It takes some time to get that capacity and that capability mobilized. Being able to sustain that is a question.
And when the national shipbuilding strategy first started, there were a lot of critics. I was one myself. Of course, it stalled, and it stalled primarily because the industry was not ready yet. Because after budget cuts, it just lambasted itself, right? And it needed to be rebuilt up. So now, after over a decade into the national shipbuilding strategy, that capability has been built, especially by you guys. So going forth, the new frigates and submarines, obviously you're going to have better capability and a better starting line than we did 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think the national shipbuilding strategy really highlighted how hard some of this is to do, and how hard it takes to build an industrial capability. It takes decades to build it, but it can be lost very, very quickly. So as we go forward, and talked about, we've grown a submarine sustainment capability in Canada, industry submarine capability over a number of years. Be able to sustain that going forward is very important.
Good. Are there any closing remarks you'd like to make? Thank you for your time, obviously.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about what we do. Said we're proud to provide submarine and critical services across Canada. I'm looking forward to continue to do that in the future. So thanks very much for your interest.
Well, and thank you. The service that you guys have been doing has been great, and you've been definitely anchored and weighed down by the public opinion on the Victoria class submarine, because that was a bad hand of cards that you were dealt, right? So.
Well, it's, as I remind people regularly, the Victoria class are 35 years old. And It's very difficult, and it's hard work to get aged assets available. So Canada's making investments, new capability, with the necessary investments in infrastructure are going to be, I'm very confident that the future with those investments, you're going to see an absolute different outcome in sustainment.
Well, because we're buying new, not secondhand.
New, complete package with all the information you need to be successful going forward.
All right, Tony, thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Defense Support Podcast. The podcast can be found on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Don't forget to follow the channel. Leave us a comment. It helps with us being found by others. There is more content on the website, of course. Have a great day, and until next time.